Hey food fans, welcome back to Then We Eat. This week, as you can see, we're all dressed up in our finest because this is going to be a very special video.
This week's episode is a Mother's Day episode. Mother's Day is this weekend, so we thought we would treat our mothers to a Mother's Day special. Unfortunately, his mother isn't available this weekend, so we'll only be able to treat my mother. But with that said, this week we'll be making
Pork medallions in a cream sauce
and risotto.
Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our pork tenderloin. This is about a pound. It might be a little bit more, but it's approximately a pound. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this up into about 1 inch thick pieces, and then we'll pound them after that. So the first thing we'll do is let's get her cut up. Okay, so we've got the pork cut into about 1 inch pieces. So the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to get a little bit of saran wrap so that when we go to beat this down a little bit, that we don't make a big mess everywhere. So I'm just going to do one at a time, but you could do, 2 or 3 at a time. So I just put it into the plastic, give it a bit of a squish down, get my hammer, and off we go. And you're looking for a fairly thin cutlet by the time you're done. You don't want them too thick, just a nice thin cutlet so they cook really fast. Here's a little fun fact for you. This mallet that we've been using in the kitchen for probably 30 years now was actually made by my father-in-law while he was still a shop teacher in Ontario. It was kind of his final gift to each of the family members when he retired from teaching. As I say, it's got to be 30 years ago. Anyway, so a fun fact, we love the thing. We've used it forever. Okay, so we have the pork pounded out. We're just going to put it out on the cutting board. We're going to salt and pepper each piece, top and bottom, just to give it a little extra flavor. So we'll get that all folded out here. All right, so a little salt and pepper. I'm going to flip over and give them a little salt and pepper on the other side. So once you have the pork salt and peppered, what we're going to do next is we're just going to take some flour. I put it in a bag. There's about a half a cup there, between a quarter and a half a cup. And we're just going to flour each of the pieces. I think what I'll do is I'll do them as I go. I don't like to leave them in the flour too long. I find that they start getting a little gummy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple, then we'll fry them, we'll do a couple more. So just give me a minute to set up the induction, and then we'll get going. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to crank up the induction burner to about medium-high heat, or probably medium heat. We're still having a little trouble getting onto this. It seems a heck of a lot hotter than our stove. So anyway, we're going to give her a shot here, and we'll see how it goes. All right, so we're going to turn on the induction now. It's a little loud, unfortunately, but I'll try to speak a little louder so you can hear what I'm doing. So we're just going to turn that on. Now, as far as butter and oil goes, I like to use a little bit of butter and a little bit of oil so that you don't burn the butter. If you do butter by itself, if it gets a little hot, then the butter will burn. With the oil, it won't, or it's a lot harder anyway. So as far as the amounts, it's a little tricky if you're going to do several different batches. You want enough in the bottom of the pan that they fry in the oil and butter, so you don't want them to just not stick. You actually want them to fry a bit in that oil and butter. So we'll just put a little bit of butter in the pan, top it off with a little bit of oil. I'm using olive oil in this case. It doesn't matter. You can use a variety of other oils, whichever one you prefer actually. All right, so let's take a couple of these pieces now. We'll give them a bit of a flour. These seriously should only be maybe 2 minutes aside. They're not going to be very long because they're not very thick. They don't need a lot, just enough to give them a light dusting, and then we'll put them right into the pan. And one more. So we'll just give those a minute or two. Let them brown up a bit. All right, so we've been about 2 minutes or so, so we're going to give it a flip. And it's got a nice crust on the outside, nice and browned up, so it's just perfect. And same thing, we'll just leave it for a couple more minutes. May only need maybe a minute more, but we'll see. And just while we wait for that, we'll get a couple more into the flour. All right, these seem just about perfect, so we'll take these out. We're going to add just a little bit more butter. And a little more oil. We'll just let that butter melt down a bit. All right, here's batch 2. I'll just give it a second. And we'll put the last batch into the flour. As you can see, they really don't take very long at all to cook, which makes it really nice because it means that you're not going to spend all night in the kitchen trying to prepare what's supposed to be a fancy meal. But I would like to point out that so far it's been pretty easy to prepare. Okay, we got the last ones in the pan, so we should only be a minute longer. Okay, so we have the pork all cooked, so the next step is to make a sauce. We're going to make a cream sauce with a little bit of brandy in it, but in the meantime, I think what we'll do is we'll let Chris get going on the risotto, and then we'll come back and do the sauce after he's completed. So, let's hand it over to Chris, and I'll see you in a while.
All right, time for some risotto. When I first said that I wanted to make risotto as one of the videos, the response I got back was, good luck. Well, today, I'm here to show you that risotto isn't actually that hard, and it's a lot of fun. So let's get cooking. So much like Steve's recipe you just saw, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna heat some oil and butter in a pan. Again, same concept. We don't want that butter burning. It also adds a lot of extra flavor. So let's go ahead. Let's start adding those ingredients. We need 1 tablespoon of olive oil, roughly a tablespoon, and we need 1 tablespoon of butter. This recipe actually calls for 3 tablespoons of butter, but one of the things you need to do is separate the butter. We need 2 tablespoons later, and only 1 tablespoon right now. So let's go ahead, start melting that butter down and heating that oil. So we're going to turn our induction cooktop on to roughly medium heat. Much like Steve said earlier, we're having a really difficult time figuring out what medium heat is and keeping it at a consistent heat. So I may have to play around with it a little bit, but we'll start on 1000 and see where things go. All right, while the induction cooktop is going, I will point out I turned it down to 700 already. It does already seem a little hot. And while that continues to get up to a little more temperature, as you can see, it's starting to steam a little bit, so we're very close. I'm gonna go ahead in the meantime, I'm gonna add 4 cups of chicken stock to a measuring cup and stick it in the microwave. You're supposed to keep it hot. Most people use a frying pan or a saucepan to keep it hot on the stove. Because of the way we're doing this today, I'd have to do it on the stove behind me. Just doesn't make a lot of sense, so we're gonna use the microwave. All right, our pan is good and hot now, so I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna add 1 finely diced shallot to that. So let's add that in and start sauteing that up. And again, that pan seems a little hot, so I'm gonna turn it down to 500 and see where that gets us. You just keep giving it a stir every 30 seconds or so. One thing you have to be very mindful of when you're cooking these shallots is that you cook them at a very low temperature. You're looking to sweat these, not fry them. If you cook them at too high a temperature, they'll fry very quickly, start to turn brown, and start to burn. You want to go low and slow, sweat those, draw the moisture out of it a little bit, turn it translucent, and make it nice and soft and clear. All right, I'd say we're well enough along now. Our shallots are nice and translucent. They've been sweating well. Let's go ahead, add the rice. So we got 1.5 cups of Arborio rice here. It's a specific kind of rice made for making risotto. So we're gonna add 1.5 cups of this to the butter, shallot, and oil mixture. What we're looking to do is coat that rice in the butter and the oil, fry it just slightly so you get a bit of a nutty smell. Then it'll be time to start adding some moisture. So 1.5 cups of rice into our pan. Give that a stir and try to coat that in the butter and the oil. Not looking to burn the rice or even really cook the rice in any way. You're just looking to get it coated. I'd say we should be good. So let's go ahead. Let's add 1/2 cup of white wine. Give that a quick stir. Make sure we get all the rice back into the wine. All right, so now what we're looking to do is just cook that wine down. We just want that rice to absorb the wine. Then it'll be time to start adding some stock. One of the things you want to do is make sure that you cook all of the alcohol off. And the other thing is keep stirring it. The last thing you want to do is have any of that rice stick to the bottom of your pot. It's going to make cooking the rest of your risotto much more difficult. I'm not sure if you can hear in the background, the microwave is no longer running. The stock isn't quite up to temperature. I'm going to go ahead, turn it back on, get that nice and hot, and get it ready to start adding to our risotto. As you can see, we're almost ready to start adding that stock. That rice absorbed that wine awful quickly. Already starting to get nice and sticky and buttery. But if you think we're close yet, not so fast. We got a long way to go yet. So let's start having some fun and adding some stock. All right, let's start adding some stock. So you're looking at about 1/2 to 3/4 of a cup of stock. I've got a ladle here. I'm gonna add about 2 scoops of the ladle in each time, then give it a stir, and then let it cook down. Once it starts to dry out, I'll add 2 more and keep repeating that until the risotto is cooked. So let's go ahead, add our first couple scoops. So I should point out that I started with 4 cups of stock. How much stock you need is going to totally depend on the quality of the rice you get, what your cooktop is like, how hot it is. There's going to be a lot of factors that affect how much stock you actually need. So don't panic if you don't have enough or if you have too much. It's not a big deal. All you're looking to do is slowly keep adding stock until that risotto is cooked. You need to make sure you keep stirring it. Last thing you need is that rice to stick to your pot. All right, I'd say we're well enough along now. Let's add 2 more scoops to our risotto and keep cooking that down. So one of the things you're looking for when you go to add more rice is that your rice is as dry as possible. The drier it is when you add more stock, the better. Because if it's too moist, it could make the outside of your rice very mushy and the inside could still be hard. All right, and time for more. Give it 2 more scoops. All right, so we're about 3/4 of the way through. As you can see, there's about a cup of sauce left, maybe a little bit more. So what you're going to want to do now is you're going to want to try it just to see where your rice is at. Because if it's cooked, you don't want to keep going. It's going to get awful mushy. The same token, if it's not cooked, you don't want to serve it now because it'll be too crunchy. So give it a test, see where it is, and then decide whether you need to add more stock or whether it's done. So I'll test mine here. A little bit of rice on a spoon. Mine's still a little bit hard, so I'm going to need to add more stock. So go ahead, we'll add 2 more. And from this point on, you are going to want to keep a pretty close eye on it because it will go from not quite cooked to overcooked, and it could be pretty quickly. So add 2 more, give it a stir, let that cook down, and then see where you're at again. All right, so our next batch of chicken stock has cooked down now, so it's time to give it another taste. You don't want to let it get too far, so you've got to be diligent to keep checking it every few minutes once you get closer to the end. It's getting very, very close now. I do think it needs more stock, but because we're starting to get so close, instead of adding 2 ladles of stock, this time I'm only going to add 1. All right, I'd say we're just about at the end now. Let's give it 1 more test, see how things are doing. Yep, it's nice and soft. Al dente, there's just a little bit of firmness left. Not crunchy, just not mushy. So I'd say we're good there. We can finish this off and then hand things back over to Steve to finish the pork. Just give this a quick stir. Then we're gonna add some Parmesan cheese and some butter to this and then give it another stir. Just kind of mix it all together. So let's add the 2 tablespoons of butter first. Get that kind of stirred in there. And we're going to add a 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese to that as well. Give that a quick stir in. Since I am serving this to somebody else, I am going to give this a taste test now, just to see where things are at and see what kind of tweaks I need to make just before we serve it to our special guest of honor. I'd say that's pretty good there. I'm just going to add some pepper to it for now. Probably want some salt later as well, but I'm just going to add pepper for now. Let that all combine together and then decide if we need more salt later. Maybe we'll add about a teaspoon of pepper, stir that in. Since we're not quite ready for dinner yet, I am going to put a lid on this now, take it off the heat, let it sit, and we'll turn things over to Steve for the finishing touches on the pork.
All right, so I'm back to finish up the pork. As you saw, risotto really isn't complicated to make. It's just a long process. And I can tell you, I had a little taste of Chris's and it's pretty damn good. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do up a little of the cream sauce for the pork and then get the pork back in. Then we'll be ready to plate. So really easy. This sauce I use quite often actually, and I just vary the ingredients that go into it depending on what the meat is we're using. Today we happen to be using pork. I use a very similar sauce on a black pepper steak. Obviously there's more black pepper, and I use cognac instead of brandy, but I mean it really doesn't matter. So it's a pretty versatile sauce, and you can play around with it as you make it more and more. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to add a little butter to the pan, and probably we should turn on the pan. Generally speaking, we would have left all of the brown bits in the pan that were there from frying when we did the meat a little earlier, but because of the way the video worked out, I washed the pan. We just didn't want it sitting around that long. So anyway, generally speaking, you can just use the pan as soon as you're done doing the meat, and you will get a lot more flavor. So once we got the butter up to temperature, we're just going to dump in a little shallot. If you're not familiar with shallot, they're like a very tiny onion. Very mild taste, a little bit of a garlicky taste as well. So if you're not crazy about onion, you may want to try use shallots. They are quite tasty. The one thing you do have to watch is you chop them up quite finely, so you want to watch that they don't burn. You're just looking to basically just get them a little softened and translucent before you add the next ingredients. All right, it looks like our shallots are about the right consistency, so at this point we're going to add just about 2 tablespoons of brandy. You want to use a pretty good brandy, much like cooking with wine. You don't want to use crap because it'll taste like crap. So you want about 2 tablespoons or so. And we'll just let that simmer off a bit, and it'll get rid of the alcohol in the pan. The one thing you sure don't want to do is when you're adding that alcohol to the pan, don't hold your face over it. 2 problems. One of them is it can flare up, and the other thing is that even the alcohol in the steam is going to make it incredibly difficult to breathe. So stand back when you're doing it. So generally what I'm looking for is to boil it down to about half of what it was before. That gets rid of all the alcohol, intensifies the flavors a bit, but doesn't take it so far that it ends up being a syrup. All right, so once that's boiled down, we're going to add a couple of cloves of garlic and about a teaspoon of Dijon mustard. And we're going to add about, I would say probably somewhere around a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of Italian seasoning. Now we don't buy Italian seasoning. We normally have all the spices to make it anyway. So all we do is we just grind it up in a pestle and mortar. I like to do it this way because rosemary tends to have pretty large, hard leaves. So we break them down as best we can to make up the spice rub. So in this is basil, rosemary, oregano, thyme, sage, and red pepper flakes, and it's all been crushed down. Easy to make. We'll put the link in the description below so that you know exactly how much of each one we used. It's pretty much all even. There's a little less pepper flakes, a little less sage. So we'll add about, I'd say about a teaspoon or so of that. And we'll give that a stir. Oh, smells so good already. All right, so once we have those added, then we're just going to add the chicken stock. Once again, just let it cook for a minute or so. Just let it get back up to temperature again. Going to add just a little bit more of the Italian seasoning. Just give it a stir around now and again, just to keep it from sticking to the pot, and just let it come back up to a simmer before you add the next ingredients. All right, so we're back up to a simmer again. So at this point, we're going to add 1 cup of heavy cream. And once again, we're just going to bring this back up to a simmer and just let it cook down a little bit, and it'll help thicken it up a bit. It normally shouldn't take too long to come back up to temperature. One of the things I found is that if you keep the ingredients in the frying pan or pot up to temperature as you're adding the ingredients, and you just wait that little bit of time to let it heat up, it takes a lot less time for it to come up to temperature. If you add everything while it's cooling down, it takes forever to bring it back up so that it's hot enough to cook. So we seem to have it just about up to a simmer, so we're just going to leave it for probably 3 or 4 minutes just for it to thicken up a bit. Okay, so the sauce has been cooking for 2 or 3 minutes. We'll just give it a little taste now and just see what it's like, see if we need to adjust any of the ingredients. It's a little flat. I think we'll add just a tiny little bit of salt, which should help bring out some of the flavors. We're going to add a bunch of black pepper, probably about, I don't know, half a teaspoon to a teaspoon. And then we're just going to add just a little tiny bit more of the Dijon mustard. Now remember, everybody's tastes are different, so you may not want to add extra Dijon, you may not want it at all. So again, make it your own recipe. It's easy, and you can change up the ingredients all you want. Sauce is thickening up quite nicely. And let's just give it another taste. All right, so we've re-seasoned it a bit. So let's give it another try, see what it tastes like now. That's better. All right, so once you have the consistency you're looking for and the flavor you're looking for, it's time to add the pork back in. Make sure when you add the pork back in that you add any of the drippings that might be in the pan as well. Okay, so we have the meat back in. We'll just give it a little toss around in there. Make sure it gets all covered in sauce. And once again, leave it for maybe, 3 or 4 minutes just for the meat to get back up to temperature again. So we'll just leave that for a minute and we should be good to go. Okay, so just about the time it's ready to come off, we're just gonna add just a little bit of fresh parsley. And that'll just give it a nice fresh flavor. So we'll give that just a bit of a stir in, and we should be ready to go. Now, as Chris pointed out a little bit earlier, once again, I'm not going to get to taste this other than the taste testing that I've been doing up till now. So we're going to do a little prep work here, make somebody very happy, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes with it's our very special guest anyway. So, see you in a minute.
Wow, welcome back to Then We Eat. What a nice surprise. The boys have cooked dinner for me, and what a dinner it looks like. Wow, risotto, pork medallions, it looks so good. We should try it. That is so good. Nice flavor of the pork, the sour cream coming through, the cognac, the mustard, all the nice flavors. We should try the risotto. Wow, that risotto is really good. You boys have really spoiled me. This is so much. Thank you so much for watching. Like the video if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that already. Comment down below, would you cook this for your mother? Or would you cook it for yourself? And remember, first we cook, and then we eat. So good.